Greetings, brothers and sisters. How you doing out there? Hope everyone is fine. Before I go on, I want to apologize for not posting as much this month. I know I've been saying that this month of October is African History Month, Black History Month. Some say African Holocaust Month. I've not been able to upload any videos because my phone has been playing up. But I finally fixed it and I finally cleared it. So we're going to be making up for lost time. Before I forget, if this is your first time watching us, please subscribe to the channel, share our videos, leave your likes on the videos, because you know, if you leave your likes, it helps with the algorithms. Leave your comments down below and subscribe. Yes, brothers and sisters, we're here to speak about Rastafarianism. You know, I've been to many places and quite a lot of people, they see my locks. I let them know that my background is Jamaican, and they always say that, oh, do you know Bob Marley? I said, of course I know Bob Marley. And they say to me, oh, Bob Marley is the head of Rastafarianism, and he's the Rastafarian God. I've been getting this for about the last sort of 10, 15 years. But I've got to come here and clear this up. Bob Marley isn't the God of Rastafari, and he isn't the leader and the head of Rastafari. Bob Marley was the carrier of the message of Rastafari. Of course, the Rastafari God is Emperor Haile Selassie I. Of course, he was, you know, born Rastafari McKinnon. His father was Ras McKinnon. He was Rastafari McKinnon. Ras means leader, means head. And when he got crowned in 1930, the coronation, I think it was November the 2nd of 1930 in Addis Ababa, alongside Empress Menen, his wife. Then after that, he was known as Haile Selassie, Emperor Haile Selassie I of Ethiopia, because, you know, he ensured that Ethiopia never got colonized. Only 2 countries in Africa never got colonized during the scramble for Africa, when the Europeans divided Africa up. As you can see, those of you know, you see the African map, there's a lot of straight lines. That was referred to as a scramble for Africa, when the Europeans and Arabs went into Africa and divided up the countries by geographically. Before, it was one whole continent, one whole country. Well, some say 2 countries. To the north you had Libya, and to the, you know, below the Sahara Desert you had Ethiopia. So according to historians like Wyndham Walker, who wrote the book From Babylon to Timbuktu, he claims that there's only 2 original races in Africa: the Libyans to the north and the Ethiopians beneath that. But we all know that at one stage the whole of the continent was known as Ethiopia, then it was known as Abyssinia, and then of course there was a war in Ethiopia, then that was divided into various countries. So you've got your likes of Somalia, which is a part of Ethiopia, and so on, Djibouti, Eritrea, and so on. But that's for another topic, another time. We're here specifically to talk about who is Rastafari's God, who is the leader of Rastafari. And I've got to say, it is not Bob Marley at all. What happened was, in the early 1900s, a lot of the ancestors, because, you know, Jamaicans, a lot of the Africans in Jamaica were brought there by the slave masters, by the British. Of course, the British, you know, Jamaica was a colony of the British, still is a Commonwealth country for the British, but they got their independence in inverted commas in 1962. But they were still under British rule. The Spanish were also ruling the country at one stage as well. That's why there's a lot of parts of Jamaica referred to as Spanish names, like Ochurias, Montego Bay. Those are Spanish names, you know. The French at one stage was also running Jamaica as well. But the English were, you know, the owners at one stage of Jamaica. And in the early 1900s, the ancestors, after slavery was abolished and so on, they'll go around talking about ancient customs from Africa. Those days they were called the Juju men. They had locks, but they weren't referred to as Rastas at that time. They went around talking and teaching about spiritualism from Africa. And then what happened was, Marcus Garvey prophesied about the coming of a king. He said, look to the east for the coming of a king. It also has it in the scriptures that look to the east for the coming of a king, and he will be crowned. But Marcus Garvey hit upon this and mentioned this. And then you had the likes of Leonard Percival Harrell, who was called the Gong. In actual fact, that's what Bob Marley got his nickname from, the Tough Gong. But the original Gong was Leonard Percival Harrell. And he would go around teaching the young Jamaicans, or the Jamaicans at that time. When I say young, at that time, there was a lot of the people who were followers of Harrell were the younger Jamaicans, because the older Jamaicans were kind of set in their ways, they were kind of Christians. But the young rebellious Jamaicans in the early 1900s in Jamaica wanted something kind of different, wanted something from the motherland. And then the likes of Harrell got these teachings from the elders in Jamaica. Then he took it on and he read about Marcus Garvey and read the scriptures, and then he gave the indoctrinations to those who wanted to listen to it. And then he was teaching at first in Spanish Town, but because of the resistance of Rastafari and because of the resistance of Afro-centric teachings, he had to leave Spanish Town. The Jamaican government soon shifted his public speaking from Spanish Town, and he found his way to Kingston. And that's where he really, got a wonderful reception. And that's where a lot of people started to take notice of him. And he was teaching for many years. And then when he started to slow down and got a bit older, around the 1950s, and the likes of Mortimer Plano, who was Bob Marley's teacher, and he taught many of the early musicians in Jamaica, people like Auckland John Bogo Parks. There was a Nyabingi drummer. Nyabingi is one of the sects of Rastafari. We'll talk about this another time. You had the likes of Count Ozzy, who was another Rasta drummer, one of the first Rasta drummers on the island, alongside Auckland John Bogo Parks, Lloyd Knibb. They had people like Rico Rodriguez. These were members of the Scatterlights, Jamaica's first real prestigious backing band in the 1960s when ska took off after independence. And a lot of the members of the Scatterlights followed the likes of Mortimer Plano, followed Marcus Garvey's teachings, followed the teachings of Emperor Haile Selassie I. And Bob Marley came afterwards. Bob Marley started taking it up in the 60s, going into the 70s, because Bob Marley was raised as a Christian, like many Jamaicans were. But the Rastafari movement came on the scene, and a lot of the younger rebellious Jamaicans, like Peter Tosh and so on, started to dig Rasta in a very thorough and deep way, and they started to incorporate it into their music. And that's why there's so many root songs from over the 60s into the 70s and then into the 80s. The likes of Bold Culture, Burning Spear, the likes of Dennis Bryan, Gregory Isaacs, Peter Tosh, I just mentioned, Jimmy Cliff, and many others, a multitude of other roots reggae artists, Mighty Diamonds and so on. The majority of the reggae artists and groups in the 70s were sung, even if they weren't known as roots reggae, even if they weren't predominantly roots reggae singers, they actually sung one or two songs relating to the movement relating to the Rastafari movement. You have, of course, the likes of Prince Emmanuel. Our son was called him Ras Emmanuel, but Prince Emmanuel, who met Haile Selassie when he came to Jamaica in 1966, and he met him and he shook his hand and he met him. Also Mortimer Plano also met him as well. Met Selassie when he came to Jamaica in April of 1966. And that's where a lot of the Rastas they that was one of their most famous and sacred days in the calendar, alongside Selassie's birthday, because they don't really celebrate Selassie's so-called demise or so-called death, but they celebrate Selassie's the coronation on the 2nd of November, Selassie's birthday on the 23rd of July, and of course when he came to Jamaica in April of 1966. So those are the dates, and of course they also celebrate Jena, the Ethiopian New Year, which there's 7 years, I think, because we're using the Gregorian calendar. So Ethiopians, they're sort of 7 years behind the Gregorian calendar, which we're using the rest. And those are really the dates that they used. Some of the dates elude me, but I know those were more or less those are the Jena, and of course the Ethiopian. Jena is I believe it's the Christmas, I think, and then the Ethiopian New Year, which just went a few weeks ago, and so on. But Bob Marley was just a carrier of the message. He sang in his music. He's not the Rasta God. He's one of the ambassadors of Rastafari, because he went around and he put the music he put the message in the music. Like he recited Haile Selassie's speech to the United Nations in 1968 when he sung, when he wrote that well, when he sung war. War is really the words that Selassie used in, in addressing the United Nations about uh, the color of a person, the color of a man's eye, and the color of a man's skin. If you can't accept that, then we're going to have nothing but war until the philosophy and the rest. The famous song on the Rastaman Vibration album. So that's where Bob Marley. That's where Bob Marley's coming from. He just carried Emperor Haile Selassie's message to the masses. But he himself isn't a god of Rasta. He isn't the leader of Rastafari. He isn't the Rastafari god. He's just one of the messengers. Because there's many, many messengers. Yeah, Mortimer Planner, who I mentioned before, was a teacher. He taught many of the early Jamaican musicians about the concept of Rastafari. He taught them about the ideologies, indoctrinations. He indoctrinated the early Rastas and taught them, and he taught them about the philosophy and the ideologies, and he gave them the Rasta mindset. So too did Prince Emmanuel, who met Selassie. He taught some of the Jamaican, not just the musicians, but the Jamaicans in general. Those who wanted to hear were taught, were given an indoctrination by the likes of Mortimer Plano, who came after Leonard Howell. Of course, Leonard Howell was the first one, and then after, when Howell kind of slowed down, then up rose the likes of Plano, who went and taught, especially the second generation, Bob Marley's generation. So the guys who would have been in their teens and 20s in the 50s and so on, in the 50s and in the 60s and even up to the 70s. They had people like Muta Baruka, who was taught by the likes of Mortimer Plano about Rastafari, philosophy and indoctrination and so on. And of course, Muta Baruka was one of the most illustrious dub poets in the whole world, and he put a lot of the Rasta concepts into his dub poetry, as well as the likes of people like Michael Smith, who got stoned in 1983, and there's a number of others. Linton Kwesi Johnson, who's also a Jamaican but based in the UK, also sort of flirted with some of the Rastafari philosophy, not as heavy as Muta Baruka, but he hit one or two chords here and there. And of course, you've got the roots artists, they've got the DJs, like the likes of Iroy, people like Dillinger, Big Youth, Trinity. These guys, there's many, many more, Uroy, and so on, Dennis Alcapone, and you've got the likes of the singers who I mentioned before. So the whole musicianship of the 60s and the 70s, and especially the early to mid part of the 80s, a lot of those artists were chanting Rastafari, were singing about Rastafari, singing about oppression, singing about slavery and so on, and teaching not just black people but the world at large about this new movement. And as you can see, white people and people of other ethnic minorities, some of them have taken up Rastafari. They love roots reggae music because the message in the music is very, very strong, very powerful, and very inspirational, and very, very influential as well. But Bob Marley was just one of the carriers of the message of Rastafari. Bob Marley, one of the carriers of the message, and of course, he spoke many, many times about how he got into being a Rastafari. He's also said many times in interviews that he was born a Rasta. He said he's been a Rasta from creation. It doesn't mean literally being a Rasta from creation. It means that it came to him at a very early age. So he's really using that example in a metaphoric fashion by saying that, we're just Rastas from creation. In other words, that literally born a Rasta, but he was a Rasta from an early time out. So that kind of like, when he was born, Rastafari was always going to be the go-to so-called way of life, because they say that Rastafari is not really a religion; it's a liberty. It's the way you live your life. It's a way of life. It's liberty. It's natural from the heart. You don't have to really be a Rasta. You just have to just accept Rastafari, Haile Selassie, accept his principles, accept his teachings, and live in a way which is conducive, living in line with nature, eating certain foods. My father tells me when he was a boy in 1940s Jamaica that the early Rastas, they never used to even live in houses. They used to live outdoors, and they used to go to the river to have a bath. And they were called a Juja man. My father tells me this, because my father was a young boy in Jamaica in the 40s and the 50s, and he saw these things at close hand. So when I was like in my teens, he told me these things about the early Rastas. the Rastas in them days wore raggedy clothes, and they ate. They everything they ate was natural from the ground or from the trees. They never ate cooked foods, and everything was natural and so on. And the way that even the Bible, and some of they used the Bible called the Maccabee Bible, and because there's some scriptures that were missing from the original holy scriptures of the Bible, like the King James version. So the Maccabee Bible had some missing books in there, and so the Rastas were using that Bible, to get their indoctrination from. And they're reading books by Chancellor Williams, by Dr. Joseph Ben Buchanan, some of the early scholars, John Henry Clark, Ivan Van Sertima. There were some of these books, Dr. Walter Wadley. Some of those books by these great writers and scholars and master teachers are banned in Jamaica by the Jamaican government, like the likes of Alexander Bustamante, who hated Rastas, and they were also always asked for Rastas to be dragged by their hair to go to courts. He said to his hatchet man to bring them in one by one, dead or alive. He hated them. And there was an incident at the Coral Garden incident, where a lot of Rastas were brutally beaten, savagely, and attacked. And we're going to talk about it again some more another time. We spoke about it a couple of years ago, but I'm going to go over it again because there's demand for it. People always come and ask me, Christian B, when are you going to talk about the Coral Garden incident again? So I'm going to come here and do a follow-up to that. So brothers and sisters, thank you for your time. I hope I crammed everything in. Hopefully we can follow up again. This is the first show of the African History Month, Black History Month. As I said at the start of the video, the phone has been playing up and so on. So I've had to finally fix the phone because I was trying to edit some videos, but it wouldn't have it. But now I'm hoping that this one can go into YouTube and that you can see this. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and share the videos, like and subscribe, leave your comments, tell a friend to tell a friend, tell your enemies as well. Okay, thank you so much. And thank you for your subscribers so far. And, one love to all of you. Much love from my heart to you. And you take care of yourselves. And I'll be back with you again very, very soon. Look out for me. Adios. Over. Aldereche. Hote. Sila. Salam. Wadada. Peace.